Welcome back. U.S. Capitol Police announcing their plan to open offices in California and Florida. They say it's part of a plan to better investigate threats against members of Congress and claim those threats have surged in recent years. Joining us to discuss, Louisiana Attorney General Jeff Landry. AG Landry, thanks for coming on today.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. All right, I just want to get your overall thoughts to this decision by Capitol Police to expand their reach. What do you make of it?
Well, look, as a former member of Congress, I can appreciate the Capitol Hill Police and their interest in making sure that we secure members of Congress. When I came in 2010 or 2011 was exactly when we had Gabby Giffords got shot. And it certainly sent a very chilling effect across the membership, right, of all the members of Congress on both sides of the aisle. As long as it's a very narrowly focused mission, and the reason that they're putting these offices in place is in order to bring enhanced security to members of Congress, then that's fine. If they're trying to expand federal law enforcement reach for other particular reasons, then that might be problematic.
Do you know who might be in charge of overseeing these efforts? Would it be the chief of the Capitol Police, who would be, again, sort of taking note of these new field offices?
Well, I would guess that certainly it would be the chief of the Capitol Hill Police who would be in charge of all of these. Of course, there is a Congressional Oversight Committee that has oversight over the Capitol Hill Police, and then ultimately the Speaker is really the one who can wield the most authority and oversight over the Capitol Hill Police. And if that Speaker does it in a very judicious and with the right intentions, then certainly it's a good program. If it's abused, then it would be problematic. But again, I think there is a number of oversight checks and balances in order to keep the Capitol Hill Police inside that narrow mission. And so hopefully that's what they're doing.
Sure. Yeah, no, you definitely raised some concern about possible abuse from it. But just before it's even started, would there be any violation of federal law, again, for these officers to leave and operate outside of Washington, D.C.?
I don't believe, especially, again, if their mission is the security of members of Congress, I would believe and hope that the first thing they would do would be reaching out to law enforcement, local law enforcement and state law enforcement agencies around the nation in the areas that they're working on. I know that right here in Louisiana, we have probably one of the best, happiest congressional warriors in Steve Scalise. And of course, he has a detail. I know that those men and women that work with him reach out and work with local law enforcement here in Louisiana to help keep him and other members of the Louisiana delegation secure.
Yeah, and you'd, of course, want every member of Congress or sitting senator to be kept safe. I want to talk to you about a new tweet that was sent out from the FBI's account over the weekend, kind of urging friends and family members to report one another. Tweeting this over the weekend, saying family members and peers are often best positioned to witness signs of mobilization to violence, help prevent homegrown violent extremism. You can learn how to spot suspicious behaviors and report them to the FBI. AG, does this kind of go back to your concerns again about the Capitol Police and their expansion? The fact that perhaps this idea that's meant to do good could turn bad based on people reporting one another?
Well, first of all, let's make the point that the reason that the Capitol Hill Police evidently feel a need to reach out around the country and set up locations in order to secure members of Congress is the fact that violence around this country is escalating. And it's escalating because most of the major cities, all of the major cities that are run by Democrats are imploding, and crime is at an all-time high. It's very disturbing when the FBI goes out there and puts out information that basically asks members, family members and friends to tattle on one another. It reminds me of a nanny state. It feels like something coming out of a Stalin book, right? Something that's more akin to socialistic government, kind of what happens in China. Again, when we have good community involvement, when people respect authority, when they respect the police, there's really no need for this type of policing or policy. And so what we should get back to doing is enforcing the laws that are on the books and holding criminals accountable.
So while the FBI would like you to be transparent with concerns you might have, I want to talk about an aspect of the White House that is not being transparent. That is the president's own sons and his art sales. Hunter Biden taking up a passion in painting, and the White House has decided to keep the buyers and the prices that they're paying anonymous, quite frankly, to Hunter Biden. What's your reaction to this story?
Well, what I would tell you is that if this would have happened during the last administration under President Trump, if Don Jr. would have engaged in this, I mean, the media would have been on fire. You would not have been able to turn on the news without claiming there was some kind of scandal. Quite honestly, based upon the evidence that we've seen has piled up in activities that Hunter Biden has engaged in, it's extremely problematic. The interesting part is the FBI should be encouraging people to tattle on Hunter Biden and basically the conduct that he has been engaging in over the last 5 to 10 years. Again, this would not have been tolerated by journalists in the mainstream media under the last administration. It's problematic. And again, I certainly wouldn't have applauded if the Trump administration would have engaged in that kind of activity. Just like I would criticize the Biden administration for allowing his son to engage in that type of activity.
Right, right. I know we've heard guests on this program say, why not just wait, do the art sales after your father is out of office? AG Jeff Landry joining us live on the program. Always great to hear from you. Thank you so much for taking the time.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Hey, I'm Rob Finnerty. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please join the conversation in the comments below. Don't forget to subscribe, too. Hit the bell icon to be alerted to breaking news. And remember, there's a whole lot more on Newsmax TV, America's fastest growing cable news network. Newsmax TV, we're real news for real people.